Hello and welcome to Edumate.tv. I'm Chetan Sharma. We learn to live and live to learn in what has turned out to be an unprecedented situation, an unprecedented pandemic, with history being written across the geography of Mother Earth. And a minor virus has created a major catastrophe, making each and every one of us rewind, rethink, reboot, re-strategize, rebuild, and of course, revitalize a new normal, a new future. In the world of education, higher education, they say the only thing constant is change. In a pandemic, they say the only thing certain is uncertainty. It's important to consider that all progress must come from change. But it's equally important to understand that all change does not lead to progress. And that's what makes the situation rather unique in the presentation of its challenges, unique in its solutions, but most importantly, unique in its set of opportunities. We at Edumate TV have, over the entire COVID period, bringing together luminaries from the world of education, every single person who has a stake in this great landscape of education, the teacher, the student, the parent, the principal, the vice chancellor, the edupreneur, the educrat, and the edu minister, to try and bring together our thoughts on a common platform to see how we can address these new challenges and find unique solutions, and also implement the historic NEP 2020 on the ground in 2021. Now, whenever you have such a tectonic shift in society and a complete metamorphosis in the way of thinking, a complete change, a radical change, it's got to be accompanied by radical strategy. Radical change in the economy has got to be accompanied by radical changes in the way we function the economy, radical changes in the way we build and rebuild the economy, and also, most importantly, radical changes in the way we protect our citizens going forward in that economy in a very new, revitalized legal space. And that's going to be our topic of discussion today in this very special webinar, which is brought to you by Aheducation, an organization that believes in taking education ahead, and it's powered by one of India's most upcoming and bright universities from the South, Sai University, who presents to you the Daksha Fellowship. All right, welcome back now to the meat of our webinar. The topic for today is revitalizing legal education, how critical that is. And we do that by trying to understand first and foremost two categories: the prevalence of archaic curricula in the current context of the Indian legal system. And then how do we assess that it's archaic is through the widening gap between expectations and reality. We'll get each of our speakers to respond to these first two topics, and then our final topic will be how do we go about closing these gaps. In the middle, of course, we will intersperse our webinar with several questions coming up from our students, in fact, for whose benefit really this webinar is all about. Our first speaker for today, it's a pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Anant Padmanabhan, Dean Academic Affairs of Sai University, who will give us a bit of a blink into what the Daksha Fellowship is all about, and then talk us through the prevalence of archaic curricula in the Indian legal system, widening gap between expectations and reality. Over to you, Dr. Anant Padmanabhan.
Thanks, Chetan. I mean, this is really a great opportunity to interact with everyone here, all of whom are extremely distinguished and committed to the cause of legal education. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thanks, Edumate TV, for serving as an excellent platform for bringing all of us together to have these conversations. To quickly give a sense of the fellowship itself, The whole idea in one sentence is really to serve as a model to bridge the gap between the world of work and the world of learning. And this in many ways is connected to the second point, which I think is what we are all here today to explore, as to where the legal education curriculum stands at the moment and where these gaps need to be filled. So I will speak a lot more about the fellowship as the conversation unfolds, but I think all of us are here really to first look at where the current gaps are, right? So on the current state of the curriculum, as we know, the Bar Council of India regulates the LLB program in the country. And of course, on LLM, just a few days ago, we saw Salvo being fired by the Bar Council in terms of regulating the LLM program as well. But be it the LLB or the LLM program, where the curriculum, I think, lacks at present is the ability to accommodate a lot of reality check, a lot of practical needs that the legal industry faces into the curriculum, right? So our students are, I think, overall given a good sense of theoretical learning. Of course, one can speak at length about the merits of each of these education models, public and private. But I personally think that in many ways, when it comes to theoretical legal education, a lot has been done and is currently being done as well. But where the challenge arises is aligning all of the theoretical legal education that we have in our curriculum with the world of work and the challenges that are faced by practitioners on a daily basis, and the need for a talent pool which is trained in what they need, right? What practitioners need to address client demands, right? So I think there are three different pieces to this in my view. One is the technology advance, right? I mean, we just saw that the Tamil Nadu government is giving, a lot of data so that, classes can go online without, without the digital divide affecting us very badly. Similarly, just a day ago, we saw a mass exodus from WhatsApp to Signal and other, messaging platforms on account of changes in the data, privacy policies. Right, and the reason I bring up these two examples is only to say that technology is ubiquitous, right? But at the same time, in our legal education curriculum, unfortunately, apart from maybe a mandatory course on intellectual property rights, there is very little to capture all these transitions that have happened, particularly, for instance, data protection, cyber security. So we have courses on cyber laws, I agree. But I think that these courses have really been sort of designed in the context of technology as it stood in the early 2000s, right? New advances in technology like drones, Internet of Things, 5G. None of this is really captured in our legal curriculum from the perspective of what the regulatory framework, the legal framework is going to be for all these advanced technologies. The second big transition that I have seen is the transition towards the regulatory state. So when we were taught law, I graduated in 2007, right? The emphasis was really on the common law system and what judges declared to be the law, and we used to read a lot of cases and understand the law. But today, if you really want to understand law, you need to understand policy. You need to understand what independent regulators are doing, be it the sector of telecom or food or mobility or any other aspect of human life. So what are these regulators doing? How do we understand the ethos of regulatory practice? I think is missing in our legal education curriculum, and it is therefore a gap that needs to be closed. And the third, of course, which is to some measure reflected in our curriculum, but which needs to be gone into in a deeper manner, where a lot of skills need to be imbibed, is disputes resolution. So, I mean, the common joke is that you get the law degree, but you learn how to be a lawyer once you join a senior lawyer and start your career as a practitioner. And I often wonder, why is that the case, right? I mean, we have clinical legal education in our Bar Council prescribed curriculum. So I think the challenge is execution of that, right? More than reflecting it in the curriculum. While in the other two cases, technology and regulation, I think even capturing it in the curriculum is lacking. Here, the issue is not so much capturing it in the curriculum as much as learning models that can execute that vision, which is laid out by the Bar Council of India in its curriculum vision. how do you execute it in a manner wherein, pedagogic approach and tools make students do much more, right? And by student activity, they actually kind of learn a lot better, and by the time they join a senior's office, they already know how to handle basic client needs, how to stand up in front of a judge, address some of these concerns, moreover also address the needs of a client holistically, right? For instance, mediation, arbitration, negotiation, bring all of this together and give a client a holistic solution, rather than just say, oh, let's go and file a civil suit, or let's go before the consumer forum, right? To give a more holistic client advice. So of course, coming back to the very first point that you raised about the Daksha Fellowship, what we are trying to do at the fellowship is really exactly all of this: capture all these gaps in our curriculum and try to revitalize legal education through that process.
Brilliant. I mean, just the fact that somebody has chosen to address this with such accuracy, it's been obviously a need over the years, Professor Surya, because having grown up, through so many facets of the economy, social life, political uncertainty, as well as a norm of functioning in a society, all of us have our brushes with law, despite not being lawyers. Now, the fact is, we've often heard, Professor Surya, is that our laws have been, archaic, coming from the time of British. They need to be changed. They seem to have lost their relevance. That is something we've heard year after year after year. And that was even pre the technology boom. After the technology boom, that seems to have been catalyzed to God knows where. And now, post COVID, it requires dramatic intervention. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Shall I interact?
Yes, sir, please. It's over to you, sir.
About respected chair and the co-participants and various other participants who joined this webinar. And actually, when I was invited, I felt very happy to participate in the webinar and share some of my views. And I came from a rural background and have the legal education, and joined a private unaided law college, then shifted to a traditional university, state established university, where law department was one of the departments. So when the initial stage, when I joined in the profession, in the initial stage, there was a talk about the establishment of National Law School. So there was some study, and actually 184th Law Commission report under the chairmanship of Justice Jagannath Rao gave an elaborate report on the status of the legal education in those days, in 1984. And he studied very seriously about McGrath report, which reformed the American legal education system. So basing upon that McGrath legal education policy, the Jagannath Rao committee gave several suggestions to establish this particular national law school system. No doubt, in 1987 and 88, almost 35 to 40 years, the concept of national law school system was started in India. And at the same time, when each state was insisted to establish one or two national law schools, Justice P.V. Sawant, the then Supreme Court judge, and after his retirement, he became the press council chairperson. He was main opponent for this particular 5 years course, because his strong opinion is the poor people, the legal education was accessible to all the people in the concept of social justice, distributional justice. Yesterday, I studied one article of Hindustan Times, where our Abhishek Singhvi also expressed his opinion, and he gave some 10 suggestions. And of course, if we have the the historical evolution of the legal education, no doubt we know 2 years education, Bar Council Advocates Act, and all these 3 years, and the LLM 1 year and 2 years, and all these things are there. But here, what the problem was, unless we have the standard in legal education, we cannot expect the standards in the legal system in the country, including the judicial officers as well as the lawyers. And here, for the last 20 to 30 years, when national law school concept was developed, and the particular idea was diluted in such a way that the national law schools were producing the products for the needs of the corporate sector. So 90% of the people studied in national law schools opted for this particular corporate sector. So the standard of even we know a lot of problems are there as far as this legal system is concerned, and particularly the 5 years course and 3 years course simultaneously we are allowing them, and as our first speaker Dr. Anand Padmanabhan said about this particular thing, lawyer was made in the courts, in the senior lawyer's office instead of being trained in a law college. So obtaining law degree in a diluted, most diluted manner. So here under the present system, it is very difficult to be failed as a law student. So 99%, 100% the students are getting pass, whether they have the real, what we say, acquired knowledge or not. The existing system, of course, uh, there is a strong need to uniform the national education policy. Actually, National Knowledge Commission under the leadership of Sam Pritoda suggested long back that in each district in the country there should be a model law college run by the government with the government funds, or any philanthropist corporate sector or any philanthropist NGO has to come forward to establish a model law school. Here there is a stratification, as we are studying stratification of the society, stratification of the legal education.
Right.
Legal education to the higher strata imparted by the national law schools,
Right.
and private private international universities like Jandal and other private universities
Right.
at one stage, and universities established by the state governments, state established universities, and private aided colleges,
Right.
private and unaided colleges, and as the article shows, particularly shops, these were considered as shops,
Right.
and business purpose, and to siphon the government funds in the name of scholarship.
Right.
The managements of the private colleges, no, we can understand they have to generate their own sources. So instead if there are 80 students in a class,
Mm-hmm.
so 70% of those 70 to 80% of the students are getting scholarship.
Right.
So these private managements are wooing and requesting those students to join in their colleges. And one advertisement is there. Andhra Pradesh private law colleges started giving advertisement in Tamil Nadu, in Madras. You can join in our college. You need not come to the college. If you come to attend the examination, it is sufficient. In the
Right.
background of COVID, even you can write an online examination. So that's
I
why
get your
Madurai
point.
High Court took it very serious.
Right. Your point
My,
is very
my
valid.
my anguish in this particular point is
Sir.
there should be a uniform national legal education policy,
Yes, sir.
and of course coupled with recruitment of the judges. And as Abhishek Singhvi also understood,
Right.
as his last suggestion, Bar Council is incapable of maintaining the standards,
Right.
because the members elected to the Bar Council, everybody knows the politics of the Bar Council is not separate from the national politics.
Right.
So the members elected, and they will, what we say, giving permissions and all these things are there, and how
Right,
they
sir.
are maintaining the control.
Right, sir.
And, there is a lot of criticism.
Right, sir.
The role
I'm
of the
sorry,
Bar
sir.
Council-
I'll have to. I get your point. I have to interject you because I have 6 or 7 more speakers and we have a lot of student questions. But thank you so much for your points of view.
So
I'm
I will
sorry.
conclude. So my suggestion is
Yes.
there should be National Judicial Commission to select the national judicial judges competent enough to be suitable to the Indian society. The
Right.
second one is there should be a uniform policy, and regarding the national law school, the law schools are to be provided the government funds or philanthropists come forward.
Right.
So there should be uniform policy right from national law school to a private unaided law school.
Absolutely.
So
So
that is
we will take suggestions. Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll take suggestions
Thank
at
you
the
very
end of
much
the
for
show.
giving me this opportunity to share some of my views.
Thank you so
very
much, Professor Surya. Now, I'll request each of you to keep your answers a little focused because we have 7 or 8 people yet to speak on the show. And what I'm going to do for the paucity of time is I'm also going to intersperse student questions because at the end of it all, this is all to do with students. And as Professor Surya was saying, the knowledge being disseminated in law colleges seems to be insufficient. It may make you a lawyer, but it may not make you a successful lawyer, right? You need a lot on the ground to be practiced. You need fellowships like Daksha to come and fine tune you, right? And perfect your art to make you a more perfect lawyer, right? So there's no doubt that there is need for your lawyers, several and more, in these very trying times, but it has to be in the right spirit and well learned. So there has to be a completion in the course. Let's get Madam Deepa Paturkar, who's joining us. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. Let's first quickly take a question, ma'am. We'll take a question from a student. I'll require you to respond to that question and also give your points of views on the opinion of the House. Swati, if you could quickly take the question, the first question.
Absolutely, Chetan. Our first question is from Parvati Krishnan, and he wants to know law relating to Old Parents Act and how effective it is.
Okay. Would you like to answer that question? If you could, madam, if you could unmute yourself and then, of course, respond to the question and come back to our parent topic. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'll just speak about the question that is being asked. The law relating to old parents. Can you just repeat the questions? It's
absolutely, ma'am. It is law relating to Old Parents Act and how effective it is.
See, I suppose the question is pertaining to senior citizens protections, protection of senior citizens, right?
The spirit, if I may just, the spirit of the thing is in conjunction with our theme about relevance. That has the law lost its relevance, and perhaps there's not enough protection given to the old parents. I think that's the context of the question.
Yeah, that is what is one of my suggestions as regards to our basic topic. There are few outdated laws which are still being taught, but these new laws are not getting covered in the curricula, and therefore there is a need to change those old laws and replace them by the new legislation. There may be a need of some few legislations, like for governing the artificial intelligence so that it does not evade into your privacy, as well as it gives you complete protection against the exploitation, so on and so forth. Apart from that is pertaining to the questions, the law is good, but I suppose its implementation is not properly being made. Since the law is good, I'm sure it should help the aged and senior citizens. However, we need to look at the utility of that law and how it is being implemented at the hands of the those who are dealing with it, especially the policymakers, as well as those who the lawyers and the judges. And as regards that, it is my observation that the legal educational sector, especially the bar, the bench, the corporate sector, and of course the law firms, they function in silos of isolated endure, and actually the need is exactly opposite. They should go hand in hand, which is lacking presently, as a result of which, even if the laws are good, they are not properly implemented, and as a result of which they are not enough effective, and they do not achieve the goal that they probably would have envisaged. Now, secondly, about the curricula, I was just thinking about what Dr. Anand and Professor Surya was saying. I realized that when I was just going through this entire discussion, I realized that we need to have some integrated topics included in the curricula in terms of, like, for example, reforms in the justice delivery system. There has to be some scope for training the students in terms of critical thinking, judgment writing. Those aspects are missing here. Secondly, I understand that internship and legal education go hand in hand. However, all students are not blessed with their godfathers. As a result of which, everybody does not have the luxury of having those connections. And since there are some students, many of them who may be more talented but less influential,
Right.
they fall back, they fall by the sideway, as a result of which they do not get those opportunities. And therefore the present legal education system should bridge this gap by providing those opportunities so that they can test the reality through internships and through experiential learning that is always emphasized. And probably too much of it is always criticized that too much of concentration on substantive law will not promote the agility of mind, and or maybe a development of, it will not promote the development of judgment skills, which is the foundation of legal education. And as a result of which, I think we should have such kind of a legal education which would enhance these skills, or hone these skills in the student, so that they can be good lawyers, they can be good judges, because ultimately judges are from amongst the lawyers. And where do the lawyers come from? They come from this legal fraternity. The students
Right.
ultimately become, since it is, there are few students that is why I just want to keep this linkage between the student, the lawyer, and the basically the bar and bench relationship. And from that
Yes.
point of view, of course, the academic autonomy is very much necessary. And my suggestion for that is, obviously, we, as Abhishek Manu Singhvi has rightly pointed out,
Yes, ma'am.
we have to have the empowered committee, or maybe national autonomous independent national council for legal education and research.
All right.
Also
I'm going to take your suggestions, each of your suggestions, towards
Yeah.
the end of the show.
Yeah.
We're first going to stick to the problems and the queries of the
Yeah.
students, please.
Yeah.
I will come back to you for your suggestions and closing
Sure.
the gaps.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for
ma'am,
giving
for
me
that. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. B. Rajeshwari, the principal of KKC College of Law. Dr. Rajeshwari, if you've joined us and you can hear me, let's take the next question.
Absolutely, Chetan. The next question is from Santosha Kumar, and he wants to get more clarity on 2-year LLM and requirements for 3-year experience for judicial exam.
All right. Dr. B. Rajeshwari, Principal, KKC College of Law, would you respond to that question and also tell us your views on the prevalence of what we believe is an archaic curricula in the Indian legal system, and there's a widening gap between the expectations and reality? Dr. B. Rajeshwari, please.
Good evening, sir. Hello.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm extremely very sorry, sir. Actually, I'm unable to say my expressions and everything. Why? Because actually I'm readying to go my native place. So that's why I didn't prepare anything. But anyhow, congratulations, sir. What you conduct this webinar, very, very useful to us. Actually, before that, actually, sir told me actually private law colleges are about the private law colleges. And for that, private law colleges, actually some of the colleges are implemented that, but actually in our colleges, we are not doing anything. Actually lost, actually I'm SV University as a principal of KKC Law College. For this, actually, we conducted, actually in the Corona period, actually in this pandemic period, we conducted Zoom classes and everything. And actually we adjusted the academic year also. in this pandemic period also, we adjusted the academic period and everything. We are adjusting like that. Actually, some of them can do, but we doesn't know. Actually, everywhere some lacunas are there. But actually, if the team spirit is there, automatically we are reducing all those things. That is my opinion. If I say anything, please, sorry, sir. So this is my suggestion. This is my request to all these things. Actually, I wanted to say that team spirit. If it is a team spirit is there, automatically we are able to change all this. Whatever it is there, we are able to change. That's why that is my suggestion.
Right.
So thank you, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining us. Please go ahead and enjoy your function. It's important to consider, I think, what Dr. Deepa spoke a little while back is about
Thank
the
you, sir.
need to
Thank you very much.
democratize law.
Yeah, sir.
And just the way that we have a democratic society, it's very important to ensure that there is equality amongst all its students. And if equality is compromised, nothing could be more unjust than that. And to think that if equality is compromised and there's or lack of justice to those who are studying justice, nothing could be more ironic. Well, let's get Dr. Shilpa Narendra Gaikwad, Assistant Professor at Singhad Law College of Pune, to respond to our next question and then give her views on the topic of the day. Over to you, Swati, for the next question.
Absolutely, Chetan. Our next question is from Abraham Joseph, and he wants to know the gap between theory and practical is so wide. Why don't the legal education undertake to provide practical training, at least in the police stations?
That's an interesting question. Are you comfortable answering that, Dr. Shilpa? Yes, please.
So, respected chair, all the resource persons and you participants, good evening to all of you. This question is really very important for all of us to understand and also see the implication of this, because what we have seen in a regular day-to-day, legal education practice is that there's a wide gap between theory and practice. Students, those who are after passing their LLB or 5 years course or 3 years course, they are failing to understand the practicals of the legal education, particularly in the court of law. So what rightly, question which is being asked as to why this gap is there. Now, when the first and very important topic is this problem, we need to understand and also focus on the problem first. So what is the problem? Problem is there's a wide gap between practice and the theory. What students are getting in the law colleges or law schools, right? When they are coming out of the campus, they are facing a lot of trouble into getting the realities. And this is because of this wider gap and because they are not having this clinical approach to the legal education. So as per my view, clinical legal education is very important. So students should get a chance to visit police stations, definitely various industrial courts. And we definitely have these practices in the final year, particularly for moot courts and court visits the students are having, but that is only in the final years as per the curriculum of the universities. But few law schools, maybe they are having this pattern of, from the first or second year. But majority of the law schools and universities follow this pattern only in the final year. So there is a huge gap. And to fill this gap, we need to highlight on the clinical legal approach of the legal education. It's very important that the student should participate in more mock trials, moot courts, so to understand the practicals and the realities which are there in the society, particularly in police stations, how to file FIR and what is charge sheet. So they are understanding, they are getting this knowledge in the theory, but at the time of implementing, at the time of practice, they are facing a lot of trouble. So I hope.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. I think it's very, very well articulated, Shilpa ma'am. Thank you for your point of view. Let me get a quick reaction from Dr. Anand on this. It's not just about legal education, Dr. Anand. It's also about the entire overall education. I mean, in India, Indian students, like all of us, have been victims of theory, and perhaps futuristically we could be victors through practice. Now, there's obviously been a yawning gap. The NEP 2020 has set out to try and bridge that gap. Now, in terms of the legal system, how are you, through the Daksha Fellowship, actually bridging this gap to ensure that whatever you learn in theory, right, is put into a more effective practical model before the lawyer goes out to practice? And also, I mean, when you talk about understanding law, it's not just the letter of law; it's also the spirit of law.
Right. I think, Chetan, all change happens from within oneself, right? So before we get to telling students that this is what we are doing, what we consciously decided is we'll tell ourselves what we are going to do first. And the first thing that we did is we broke the curriculum down into 3 different pillars. So there's a knowledge pillar, there's an expertise pillar, and there's a skills pillar. And at every given point in time, we are tracking constantly as to where we are on each of these pillars. So the knowledge pillar is what we call the foundational knowledge, which every Daksha fellow, regardless of which pathway they choose, because we have 3 different pathways, I'll come to that now too for the coming year. So the knowledge pillar is basically public policy, a knowledge of finance and accounting, a basic knowledge how to read a balance sheet, how to have some numerical thinking, right? Then in addition to that, foundations of public law, foundations of private law. Right, with all of this, you have a bucket of knowledge, what you call the theoretical learning, though I don't, again, even there, we don't, do it only in a theoretical manner. For instance, when you're doing something like foundations of private law, students are actively taken through contracts, I mean, transactions, right? And they are explained the principles of private law, like force majeure, for instance. That basic idea of a force majeure, which in the context of COVID has become a very important clause, right? We take some of those clauses which are there in actual contracts and then train our students to read that contract in a real world scenario, right? And same goes with public law as well. So we give them the theoretical knowledge and some of the practical knowledge as well. But the point is that it's a common base on which we then set up the case for the next pillar, which is the expertise pillar. On expertise, we have 2 different pathways at Daksha, the technology law and policy pathway and the disputes and regulatory practice pathway. Tech law and policy is pretty obvious. I mean, like I mentioned at the very beginning, there are many things which are not covered in our legal education model. I find the disputes and regulatory practice pathway a lot more interesting in the way it is structured. So we really understand that a lot of our understanding of disputes resolution is to teach students civil procedure code, criminal procedure code, evidence, and then hope that they will now be able to implement all of this, right? And the reality, unfortunately, is that they cannot. So what we really do here is we give them the client's perspective. We make it a point to place them in the perspective of a lawyer addressing a client. There's a lot of role play, for instance, in our teaching model, right? So foundations of dispute resolution are taught from this particular lens of when a client comes to you, how do you guide that client? And there you bring in all these elements of negotiation, mediation, arbitration. Of course, there's a whole course on arbitration. Right, but the idea is that we do a lot of role play, we do a lot of actual simulation exercises to make students go through the provisions of the written law, but in practical settings to the best extent. And of course, I must add here that we are aided a lot by practitioners. So the Daksha model itself is that we have core faculty for every course, and each core faculty has the mandate to get about 10 visiting faculty, practitioners involved in their course. I mean, that's an obligation cast on the teacher. So like I said, right, it's not really telling the student that this is what you should be doing. We first tell ourselves that each of us, like I, for instance, head the technology law and policy pathway as well, right? I hold multiple hats.
Right.
And as director of the pathway, there is an obligation on me to bring, practitioners in media law, in entertainment, in data protection, cyber security. We have to get that. It's an obligation that we have placed on ourselves. And then finally, you have the skill set pillar, right? On the skill set pillar, we have, writing, critical thinking, digital presentation. So there's a lot of that element of practical application. How do you convert your knowledge into good presentation, right? And Chetan, you know this better than any of us, right? And coming from the media industry, that presentation is a significant aspect of our personalities, how we can articulate what we know and learn, right? And that is something that we really try to help our students understand. For instance, just a few days from now, we have a journalism boot camp. Why should lawyers really be doing this, right? The idea is that you talk to a senior journalist and reporter like Mr. Samant Subramanian, who's engaging our students on a full boot camp on how journalists write and convey. And I think that's a very powerful tool which lawyers should actually be aware of. So this is a short, or reasonably short.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so important, to have those finishing touches. We say that this country's got such brilliant minds. Even in a game of hockey, we take up the position right up to the goal, but then the finishing touch somewhere is lacking, and we are left a little bit of a miss. It's a bit in jest, but that's the fact. I mean, we do so much good to about 90%. That last 10%, that finishing touch is so critical. And perhaps I'm so grateful that somebody has come up really to focus on that critical finishing aspect, which actually differentiates between a good lawyer and a great lawyer. Thank you for that, Dr. Anand. Moving over to Dr. Anish Pillai, thank you for your patience in listening to all that we've been saying. I see a smile in your face, so obviously you've been gaining a lot of insights. Let's take the next question from Swati. You can respond to that, Dr. Anish, and then, of course, give us our views on our topic of the day.
Absolutely, Chetan. Next question is from Ramya, and she wants to know what are the opportunities available for an LLM pass out currently in terms of internship?
Yeah. So at the outset, let me thank EduMate TV to give me this wonderful opportunity. I consider it's a honor and privilege to be with this august audience and learned resource persons. So let me start with the question. In fact, I would say being an LLM student, once he or she completes an LLM, is it necessary need to go for internship? That is my first question. Why I am asking this question? Internship actually mean for LLB students generally. The idea is to make them aware of the legal process. And once a student successfully completes LLB, thereafter he or she is joining for an LLM course. The idea is to get a specialized knowledge in a particular branch of law. Now, if he or she is focusing on a corporate job or she wants to join in a law firm, then of course that student can go for internship. And there are number of institutions, number of firms, they will provide internship. But one problem which I observe in India is whether the student is from LLM or LLB, there is no such difference. The law firms will consider all of them equal. So this LLM student will be working with an LLB student, maybe 2-year, 3-year or a first semester student. That problem he or she may face. So I sincerely advise those who want to go for internship, especially after LLM, I would say no, don't do that. Rather than you can join as a junior lawyer along with a practicing lawyer so that you can learn, you will get needed knowledge. So whichever field you interested, whichever law you want to know more, go and join with a good senior lawyer. That will help you, and that will solve your problem. I think that is what my answer for the question. Now coming back to our discussion regarding the first part. Now, if you see a student who is studying for 5-year LLB course, at the end of 10th semester, he or she will be studying around 50-55 law papers. Now, my problem with that is it necessary to have that many number of papers? Or rather than, we should focus on fundamental papers and we should give an in-depth knowledge in that particular paper. I'll give you one example regarding the constitutional law. In most of the college, in their curriculum, constitutional law is divided into 2 parts. One is Constitutional Law 1 and Constitutional Law 2. Now, in how many colleges the teachers are getting time to discuss a case, constitutional law case, in its proper sense? Because as per the BCI mandate, there is a time framework. This much number of classes are required and there is a very bulky syllabus. And within that pressure to complete the syllabus, whether teachers are able to give a detailed analysis of a case. If we were getting time to give that type of analysis, that will remain in the mind of the students. So we should educate them how to analyze a case. Now the syllabus or present curriculum will not have that opportunity, unfortunately. Second thing is regarding the practical oriented papers. Somebody had raised that question.
Yeah.
Thanks to Abraham for raising that question.
Right.
This practical oriented subjects. Now, there is always a dilemma regarding the reality and the theory, or practice and theory. Now, most of the teachers having the opinion, we should inculcate the practical oriented learning method, or we should inculcate the values of practice. I have a slight difference of opinion in that. In our curricula, we should not do much focus on practice. The reason is, this is a formal education. Legal education is formal. And in that formal education, we should focus on the theoretical aspects. And very few practical papers are there, which are common. And with respect to that common practical papers, we should have a practicing lawyer, a well-versed practicing lawyer. He should take the class. And he will be the best person to impart the practical aspects of that subject. But other than that, for all other subjects, if we will more focus on the practice, I am sure we will miss out the important theoretical part, because legal education is a formal education. That's the only time. Because at the end of this course, the person is going to join in the bar. Now, another reason why I am saying we should limit the practice-oriented session here, or practical, we should not give more focus on the practice. The reason is, out of 50 or 60 students from a batch, all are not going to join in legal profession. Now, some of them will go for LLM, then they will go for other jobs. And very few, hardly less than 50% of students only going to join in the bar as a practitioner. So those who are having that interest, let them learn while joining in the bar along with a senior lawyer. Let them learn. And it is easy if they have the theoretical background. It is easy for them to grasp that aspects so that they can become a very good practicing lawyer.
Right.
So that is what I want to make a point. And one small another thing regarding our present curriculum is, I believe that the curriculum.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just 30 seconds, I'll finish. I believe that the curricula is something which is very important for imparting teaching learning process. Now, in that curricula, in most of the colleges, we have a course like BA LLB Honors or BCom LLB Honors. Now, I wonder, in most of the university or most of the law colleges or legal institutions, what they mean about honors course. Whether their curricula is in reality reflecting the way in which honors courses are visualized. I'm doubtful, because I have the experience with several private law colleges, state-aided colleges, deemed university institutions, even National University. I myself was part of National University one point of time. I am not able to understand why they are not giving the focus of the real sense of honors course, rather than they are just giving a title of their course honors. So these are all I want to make about the course curricula, and if I will get more time, I can probe into more issues.
We will try and come back to you. We are already running very short of time, but I think you were very explicit in what you said, very detailed and very comprehensive. Thank you for that, Dr. Anish.
Thank you.
An interesting point of view which you made, that perhaps there's no need to change the curricula, but yes, there should be a change in the way you disseminate that curriculum and how you teach it. You can bring practical aspects of teaching it, but the curriculum per se needs, because it's a formal education, needs to have that element of theory to understand the law, because it is scientific at some stage and it's technical also. So that, to maintain that sanctity, I think that's a point that's well taken. It's also in conjunction with what was said earlier by Dr. Anand, is not just the what, but the how. When you spoke about media people, like us, but we often say, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. That makes the impact. In fact, in the same way, it's how you disseminate that course in a practical manner to make people understand, not just for marks, but also to make their mark in their career, is very important. Our next set of questions, and we have Dr. C.H. Divakar, who's joined us now for Principal of Siddharth Law College. It's over to you, sir, to respond to this question coming up on your screen. Over to you, Swati.
Thank you, Chetan. Our next question is from Bharat Kumar, and he wants to know, recently NLU Bangalore was trying to conduct a separate entrance for its college, but it was struck down Do you think it's viable? Do you think it's viable if all NLUs starts conducting their own entrance exams?
Good Lord, this could be absolutely crazy, but well, I can answer that without having been an expert in law. But yes, Professor Divakar, thank you for joining us. Your point of view on this very intriguing question. You can unmute yourself, sir. Thank you.
So please, can you unmute?
Unmute yourself, sir. We're not able to hear you, please. There's a button on your... Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Let me congratulate the organizers for conducting this webinar on a topic of primordial and paramount importance for our contemporary society. And the question raised by the participant regarding uniform the conduct of uniform exams by all NNU, all national law schools. Yes. Unfortunately, very recently, the NLU Bangalore had conducted its own exam. But in my perception, the exam should be conducted by all the NLUs to ensure equity in opportunities. Okay. So going now coming to our topic and what needs to be done to facilitate reform and rejuvenation in the state of legal education in India. And for that, we need to understand that law doesn't have autonomy. Law simply reflects social reality. So when the social reality changes, law also changes. So therefore, the point I would like to emphasize is there should be constant and continuous revisit and relooking of the curricula. And we are living in an era of globalization where there is an increasing integration, interface, and coordination in between and across legal, in between and among legal systems across the world, calling for new approaches, wherein certain old concepts of law and legal principles have gone into oblivion, anachronistic, obsolete, and demanding the emergence of new concepts, new legal principles to meet the challenges of the society. For example, the new Consumer Protection Act 2019 has done away with the territorial jurisdiction, saying that a complaint can be filed by a complainant even at the place of his residence. So so therefore, the point I would like to make is, so the changing needs of the society and increasing integration among the economies across the world have thrown up new challenges, new problems. Therefore, the legal education must be able to meet the challenges effectively and efficaciously. So for that, we need to overhaul the curricula. And for that, what we need to do? And I have some suggestions to make. And the first and the foremost important thing is improving the quality of human resource. So the first stage of reform begins with improving the quality of legal reform. So without improving the quality of legal reform, if one aims to improve the quality of legal education, then he or she is in a fool's paradise. The first and foremost requirement for improving the quality of legal education is improve the quality of human resource and infrastructural facilities. So we need to look at that.
Sure.
And the second important thing is honing up of the skills, dexterity, oratory and advocacy skills of the budding lawyers. So we need to emphasize emphatically how to hone up the skills of budding lawyers. And for that, we need to give practical orientation. So now in our theoretical, in our didactic, in our methodology, we give emphasis in making the student to understand the legal provision.
Right.
But that is not sufficient. What we need to do is how that legal principle has come into being.
Right.
And how it evolved. What are the sociological, political, economical, cultural, and customary conditions that shaped, carved, and molded it?
Yeah.
And if you give that perspective to the student, that student takes a lot of interest in law, and he will be in a position to understand what are the rootings of law. So that is very important.
Right.
So that should be the practical and pragmatic approach to make the student to understand the rootings of law,
Right.
and the foundations of legal concepts and how they are useful to the society. So that plays a very important role in making the law, in making law students, in taking more interest and thinking out of box. That is very important. And the other important thing is convergence between theory and practice.
Right.
And unfortunately, there is if there is anything lacking which is so pervasive and so unbridgeable gap in the present legal system is there is a mismatch. There is complete mismatch between theory and practice.
Right.
And we train the student in understanding a legal provision, but are we doing our best in making the student how he can apply the legal provision to a real life situation? That is very, very important. If you make a student to understand how a legal provision can be made applicable to a real life situation, then it empowers him and it increases his level of confidence, and it also enables and empowers him to engage in a public spirited activity. That is what is actually lacking nowadays.
Wonderful.
So that we should look at. And the other important thing is,
I'll come to you because
one more point, sir, very important point. And as my Professor Surichandra Rao has rightly pointed out about the lax regulatory mechanism. That is a sad part of legal education. So Bar Council of India is a regulatory agency. So the Bar Council of India should be proactive in exercising its regulatory powers so that the quality parameter and improving the quality of human resources should be the benchmarks, and they are non-negotiable under any circumstances.
Right.
So therefore, the Bar Council of India should focus on these aspects. So if you address these things, so the last important thing which I would like to emphasize emphatically would be that see, world over, the legal education is undergoing mind-boggling changes because of increasing integration of digital services into legal services. So therefore, so even artificial intelligence has been integrated into legal education and legal services. Therefore, see, in the present system, there is a dichotomy in the sense that national law schools and traditional law schools. But the point which
I'm running out of time, sir. I'm sorry.
One second, sir. The point which I would like to pinpoint is islands of academic excellence cannot exist and survive in the oceans of academic mediocrity.
Right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I get your point of view. Very, very well taken. Very, very well articulated. Thank you. I have another speaker to go before I wrap up the thing.
Thank you.
Madam Sashmina Ayyappa, who's also with us. Swati, could we have our final question of the day before I take a wrap up from everybody, and we get Sashmina ma'am to answer that question? We're already over time. Thank you. Swati.
Absolutely, Chetan. Varghese Vijay wants to know role of emotional intelligence in law school governance.
Well, brilliant question, actually. Very difficult to answer. But Sashmina ma'am, are you there with us? If we could get you to answer this, please.
Sashmina ma'am has requested to keep her video off because
no problem. Could we have her point of view, please?
Ma'am, please, if you could unmute yourself and let us know your point of view.
Respected Chairman, various dignitaries, and I'm happy to share my opinion. But I want to know about the question again. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, absolutely, ma'am. My Varghese's questions is role of emotional intelligence in law school governance.
Okay. This is one type of psychological question where the student and the student and the teacher relationship comes into existence. So in this situation, I'm in favor of this. Why? Because when the teacher, he acts like now actually it's a law school. We won't say that we are a lecturer in the law college. We say it's a teacher and the student bond here. So in these circumstances, especially when we talk about the legal form, law of reform, we need some exposures. So some of the things what we need is uh,
Ma'am, we are not being able to hear you.
Ma'am, you seem to have unmuted
more
yourself.
on reality rather theoretical learning. And in my opinion, I think that in from first year onwards, the students should be allowed to visit all the practical, the clinic classes. It should be made compulsory for them. And even it should be made mandatory for all the students that they should go and sit in the law courts. And because and that chamber practice what we do in the final year, we want it to be done, because when we were the student of JSS Law College, that time it was compulsory for us to go and sit in the court after the classes when it gets end. So these are the things where the practical training will start from the very beginning. And I would personally want that all the students, they should do in this manner only to get little self confidence. So these are the things which is required for the new legal reform. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. We already are over time, but I need to ask one question to each of you as a small wrap up. So I'm going to give each of you about 30 to 45 seconds maximum to answer 2 points which you feel need to be implemented immediately to change this widening gap between relevance and irrelevance, the new and the old. How do we alter, how do we bridge this gap? 2 important points that need to be inculcated either in our curricula or in the way we disseminate that curricula, right? But 30 to 45 seconds, please, 2 important points to each of you, starting with you, Professor Surya, if you can hear me. Professor Surya? All right, we go to Dr. Shilpa, please. Dr. Shilpa Gaikwad, what are your 2 points? What are your 2 changes that you wish need to happen in the Indian legal system as of now?
So regarding this, as you asked, the 2 important points, I think we have seen this post-pandemic situation. We need to have more and more e-learning resources, because what we have seen that majority of the students were not able to specifically get into touch with the classes, online classes. So there is a big gap in this post-pandemic situation is very challenging. So e-learning like Swayam MOOCs, that platform has to be developed. Teachers training is very, very important, because what we have learned about the e-learning, that is in this last 10 to 12 months. So before that, we were not that much that much efficient. So I think to reach towards the maximum student, we need to have more and more effective learning as to the e-learning has to be implemented.
Wonderful. So e-learning, teachers training, your 2 mantras. Thank you for that.
It is very important.
Professor Surya. Yes, thank you very much. Professor Surya, your 2 points, please. The 2 changes that you'd like to inculcate in the curriculum right now, either the curriculum or the way it's disseminated.
The existing
2 brief points, sir.
Actually, the curriculum is so vast. Say, for example, for a lawyer practicing in district level, need not have international law and other those things. So my point is, there should be 50% compulsory subjects to each and every student, and 50% must be optional subjects. Say, for example, the lawyer who is practicing at district level must be equipped with land revenue code, land laws, and other things. Whereas, of course, having a senior position may have that particular inculcation of everything to be learned. So, at higher Supreme Court senior advocate who is dealing with a land issue, he may have known. But my point is, 50% syllabus must be compulsory subjects.
Right, and 50% optional, yes.
Optional 1, optional 2, model 1, model 2, model 3. There should be 3 models where some special subjects can be provided.
All right, very valuable point. Thank you, Professor Surya. Madam Deepa, what are your 2 points, please? If you can unmute yourself.
Okay, sir.
Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself. Deepa ma'am. That's the new normal. That's the
Yeah.
first change, yes.
I know. That is what as Shilpa madam said, that we need to be technologically updated. This is
Thank
okay.
you for
The
that.
first suggestion that I want to give you is there is need to design a roadmap to transform legal education, and we as is already pointed out that the technology is the need of the hour. It to make legal education inclusive, all inclusive. We have to give enough funding, support, financial assistance to the students who cannot afford this technology. And to have, as a result, we need to spread distributive equity over inclusive legal education, so as to not only provide education to those students who cannot afford, but also this will take us in the top 300 universities throughout the globe. We are, barring two exceptions, I don't think we stand anywhere in the list. So that needs to be. Yeah.
Important points. Thank you very much, man. Dr. Anish, what are your 2 points that need immediate implementation?
Yeah. So first of all, regarding this curriculum, I would say the bulky subjects, the content of the subject should be reduced and the subject should be rearranged so that the teacher will get ample flexibility to teach in depth or impart in depth knowledge. Secondly, the teachers, those who are teaching practical subjects, should be given an internship or should be allowed to practice before the court, or at least they should be allowed to join in the court during the sessions going on. The reason is so that the teacher should get the knowledge, how the theoretical knowledge is transformed into practice. And if a teacher having that knowledge, I am sure we can bridge the gap between practice and theory. Because once a teacher knows best how his theoretical knowledge is being translated into the court, how it is imparting, that teacher can impart the same to the student in the class. So these 2 things, I think it is very urgent and necessary for improving our existing legal education.
Very important points. Rearrangement of the course as well as flexibility being opted to the teachers. Thank you for that. 2 very pertinent points. Zashmina ma'am, what are your 2 points? Zashmina Ayappa ma'am.
Yeah. As per, I also agree with the ma'am what they have said, that technological update we have to be. E-learning is compulsory, and knowledge knows no limit. We have this proverb. So in that circumstances, collaboration with the foreign law university. Suppose if ever we are going to interact with them in this, like this of webinar, if ever it starts in the college also, certainly our legal, we can say that there is a improvement in our legal reform.
All right, thank you much. And over to you now, Mr. Divakar. What would be your 2 points in terms of inculcation in the current thing? What are the 2 changes that are required? Professor Divakar.
Sir, can you unmute yourself, Professor Divakar?
Yeah, right. First thing I would like to recommend would be a compulsory internship. Internship gives an opportunity to the student to deduce how the provision which he had imbibed can be made into practice. The second important thing would be inclusion of emerging laws. For example, there is an increasing emphasis on regulatory mechanisms, where each sector has a regulatory mechanism. So these laws on regulatory systems should be incorporated into the syllabi by eliminating duplication. Now we have in our syllabus, there's a lot of duplication. For example, we have legal and constitutional history that could be included in the constitutional law itself. And similarly, we have papers like women and law. Women and law, and the part of women and law in pieces has been dealt in various papers. So such kind of duplication should be immediately removed. And the emerging laws of utmost importance, which are relevant to the changing needs of the society, should be included. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Duplication to be removed and introduce more relevant stuff, because even if you're studying that much, at least it's more pertinent, and it's of course evolving as society evolves with so many changes that have taken place over the last 30 years, and the last year, of course, has been a case in point. Final word from you, Dr. Anant Padmanabhan. your changes which are required with immediacy?
Right. So I would say that, you know, more practitioner involvement in shaping the curriculum as well as course delivery. I think that's one. And the second thing is a lot of focus on extra legal disciplinary impetus. And I don't even mean interdisciplinary, just things like leadership skills, better speaking skills, like a journalism, you know, orientation. I think those are important in the world that we live in today. And I would think that that is a core feature to be included in legal education, though it is not from the world of law.
Well, thank you so much to each and every one of you for your points of view. I think if I have to sum up this, I always use one letter to sum up all your answers. And perhaps what needs to be done is to make the law, I find the letter P to be very relevant. It's got to be more practical, it's got to be more prudent, and it's got to be more pragmatic. And if you have that, perhaps you would have incorporated several or perhaps most of the points of view which each of you learned gentlemen and madams have brought up on this very, very important show. So at least we all agree to disagree in the sense that, well, there has to be a change. The change has to be definitive. It may take its time, but its time certainly has come. And we say that on edumate.tv in every single show. I'm going to repeat this because it holds true for law as well, that the only way to fight the big C of COVID is through the 3 C's of being corrective, collective, and creative. And our Indian legal system, particularly its current education system, its current curriculum, requires just that. Thank you for joining us this very special show. And we hope to connect with you over a period of time as we move along on this very, very fascinating journey on how the legal system needs a complete reorientation. Till then, thanks for watching edumate.tv, and don't forget, educate better, you'd better edumate.